Well, welcome back to Actionable Intelligence. I'm Eric Greitens. We're joined now by Just the News founder and editor-in-chief, John Solomon. John, you've got a big news story out. It's up right now at justthenews.com about what happened at the Capitol and 3 remaining unanswered questions.
Yeah,
tell us understand we got some breaking info.
One of the reasons why lawmakers are so concerned that this was sort of a drive-by impeachment, a one-day, couple hours, and impeach the president. There is some significant evidence beginning to emerge of 3 things. One, that the Capitol Police, the NYPD, the FBI, all had prior warning that there was going to be an attack on the Capitol. They knew some of the people. They knew some of the things that were being said, even talk about killing cops, as tragically what happened. It was serious enough to warn the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Now, that has several repercussions. One is, how did the leaders of Congress react to this intel? Did it get to them? Did Nancy Pelosi know? Secondly, if this was a planned attack, you can't be the President of the United States being accused of inciting a spontaneous attack when it was planned days before. Right. And so I think both from an impeachment perspective and from a factual security perspective, we're learning things, and we shouldn't be in the posture of making final assignments of blame until we know what the facts are. Another thing that we're hearing, and Congressman Clyburn of South Carolina, one of the most respected Democrats in the House, first raised this. I'm hearing there's significant evidence of this. Part of this planning, this pre-plan, was helping people on the inside, helping them to learn the Capitol, to have maps of the Capitol, to know how to get around in the Capitol. This was a planned attack if this information bears out as what the federal law enforcement is saying. The FBI is saying this now. The U.S. Attorney in Washington says he's bringing a conspiracy case. As you know, you can only bring a conspiracy case if there was planning. Right? You can't have a conspiracy in a spontaneous moment. So these are really big revelations, and I think this story, the Capitol siege story, will go the route of some things we've heard in the past. We once before were sold a story that there was a spontaneous attack. It occurred in Benghazi. Right. Susan Rice, about to go back into the Joe Biden administration, told us it was a spontaneous attack spurred by an anti-Muslim video. Right. It was a terror attack carried out by an al-Qaeda affiliate, planned weeks in advance. That was the final intelligence assessment. The Russia story. Told there was collusion. Then we found out everybody knew there was no collusion and it was a bogus thing, but they went with it anyways. I think this story has the potential to boomerang around in a very different ending than what the American people were presented today.
And it sounds like it's turning very quickly. I mean, in the Benghazi case, you had Susan Rice coming out saying this was a spontaneous attack based on a video, and that went on for days. And in some cases, they were pushing that story for weeks until finally we learned the truth. What are we learning? What's the latest right now that we know from the interviews that we're doing with investigators, with police?
So I've been told that some of the key security people in the Capitol, the sergeants of arms of the House and the Senate, and the Capitol Police Chief, all 3 who have resigned, have had some contact, some form of interviews with the Metropolitan Police Department, which is the lead investigative agent now. We FOIA'd those reports this morning, and we got our good colleague, Natalia Ministato, stands right behind us here. She got a response back almost instantly from the police department saying, we're not releasing the information, and here's why. It's going to be personally embarrassing, privacy invading to release these information. It doesn't make sense. These were public officials. Their job was security. What they told the police ought to be a matter of public record. We're going to fight for those documents. But something tells me what's in those documents has some very big relevance to what happened on the Hill. And the question I have is, what did Nancy Pelosi, what did Mitch McConnell know about these threats beforehand? If they didn't know, it's an intelligence failure of the police. If they did know, there's something they didn't tell us before we went into this impeachment round today.
And so for our viewers, walk them through the chain of command for a sergeant at arms who's responsible for security, just so they understand how this works.
I was on Newt Gingrich's podcast this morning, and he said, as Speaker, Sergeant at Arms was always in contact with me. That was my security man. That was the guy for the entire Capitol that I relied upon for those things, as well as many formalities. It would be almost implausible to think that he would have gotten warnings from the NYPD, we know that from NYPD, from the FBI, from the Defense Department saying, hey, there's a chance of violence here, and him not go to his bosses and talk to Pelosi or at least her staff. So Susan Keating, our great reporter here, she's working on something. I think we'll have answers to some of this tomorrow morning. But what Nancy Pelosi knew and when did she know it is an important question. It should have been answered before impeachment. What Mitch McConnell knew. There's a Senate Sergeant at Arms, same thing, same relationship. The Capitol Police Chief reports to those two security officials, the Sergeant at Arms, and then up to the Speaker and leaders of the House. We do not know what they know. And I think a week into this, that is a gap in our knowledge that we should try to close. That's what we're working on here at Just the News.
Yeah, well, it's obvious it's a really important gap, and it's especially important in light of what happened today. I think a lot of Americans on both sides of the aisle are actually concerned about the precedent that's being set, where you have an impeachment that's happening essentially with no investigation of the events that actually took place.
I've been in fast food lines that went slower than this impeachment today. It's a scary thing. It's not what our founding fathers intended. Maybe there is blame to assign to the president, but the facts weren't entered in a way. It was all emotion, all rhetoric. And to now hear, as this proceeding was finishing, to hear the FBI talk about pre-planning. And here's a funny thing. A few minutes after the impeachment went over, CNN matched our story this morning and said, oh, there's evidence of a significant pre-plan. That would have been nice for the American people to know before their lawmakers voted on this impeachment proceeding today.
Absolutely. Now, when we go back to the first impeachment, which was just a couple of months ago, at the time, the president and his team were saying that the whole Russia collusion thing was a hoax. They were talking about the activities of Hunter Biden and former Vice President Joe Biden as they related to Ukraine. All of those things were being raised at the time. You've also got a story out at justthenews.com right now about the documents related to Russia that haven't been declassified, but it sounds like there are also some important documents that we've just recently learned about.
Yeah, so last night I put the 40 that I've been talking about on television for the last few months. The president is aware of these documents. I think his staff has been able to get about 80–90% of it released, or at least declassified, and they're waiting for the final 10%. The bureaucracy is slowing them down, throwing roadblocks in their way. I still think there's a good chance that before the president leaves office at 12 o'clock on January 20th, that we will get these set of documents. They range from everything from internal documents that the Inspector General saw during the Hillary Clinton and Russia investigations to internal communications between Comey and his brass at the FBI. Very important things that fill in the gaps in our knowledge and give people a complete story of just how bad this was. I think when it's done, this is the story that people will take away. Hillary Clinton's team invented the Russia collusion story and used intelligence apparatchiks to get it into the system after learning that she had new problems on her email, that maybe a foreign power had possession of some of her classified emails, and they went out to, this is a document I've seen, vilify Donald Trump with this false story. That's, I think, what these documents will put into a time continuum, help people to understand a more 30,000-foot view of what really happened. Now, today, as I was working on this, I learned of another document that was kept from the president's impeachment team, I'm told, was kept from the Senate investigators. They only recently learned about it. What is it? It is an email on November 22nd, 2016 by George Kent, the guy with the bow tie, the Democrats' star witness in the first impeachment trial where they at least allowed some witnesses. And he wrote in November 22nd about his concerns about Joe Biden in the context of Burisma and Hunter Biden, the conflict of interest. We know he's testified he saw the appearance of a conflict of interest. He tried to warn Joe Biden that maybe he shouldn't be involved in this, and he couldn't get to the vice president. This is a contemporaneous document where he mentions the vice president in this context. It was classified. Everybody who's looked at it tells me there's no national security information. The only thing this is protecting is not security information, it's protecting reputations. So I'm hoping that in the next 24, 48 hours, the State Department will finally make this document public. But keep in mind, we went through an impeachment, and this sort of critical evidence was not released.
Wow. So we had what we now know, at least from this document, is that we had an impeachment of the President of the United States, and an essential document relating to one of the key witnesses wasn't released at the time to become public knowledge.
And let's take people back to what the president was impeached for. Because I think people forget. At the end of the day, the impeachment was the president had no basis to ask Ukraine to investigate the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Burisma scandal. And it was called a conspiracy theory now. Now, months after that happened, what did we learn? Why that impeachment trial was going on? Hunter Biden was under criminal investigation. There was a reason to investigate him. We found out that not once but twice State Department officials reported to Washington they believed Burisma paid bribes to Ukrainian officials why Hunter Biden was on the board. Not that Hunter Biden paid him, but he was on the board, had to be oversight responsibility when these acts occurred. And we found out that State Department officials believed that Joe Biden created a conflict of interest. All of that would have been relevant to the president's defense. It was kept from him in great part by the bureaucrats at the State Department. We have forced it out through repeated lawsuits with our good friends at the Southeastern Legal Foundation, Just the News and Southeastern Legal Foundation. That's the sort of impeachment gaps we have. We can only wonder what gaps in knowledge we're going to learn later about the impeachment that occurred today in less than 6 hours of procedure in the House.
Tremendous gaps. And one of the things that you point out in your story is actually one of the lessons that we always talk about in the SEAL teams, which is that the very first report that comes from the battlefield is always wrong.
Isn't that true?
It doesn't mean that people have bad intentions, but it just means that in a chaotic and difficult situation with a lot of complexity, that first report is always wrong. Our first impression of what happened during 9/11 was wrong. As you mentioned, the reports about Benghazi were wrong. The reports about Russia collusion were wrong. And yet now we've impeached a president for a second time and a full investigation hasn't yet been done. I know you and the team are going to stay on this throughout.
We absolutely are. We owe the American people the truth. Whoever is to blame, whether it's the president, other people, we should get to the bottom of the truth and assign the facts so people can make up their own mind. That's what we do here at Real America's Voice, what we do at Just the News. We give facts. People can make up their own mind. They've been force-fed a story without all the facts, and I think that's going to be our job going forward to unravel that, unpack that.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Well, folks, again, that is John Solomon, I believe the hardest working journalist in the country, who is bringing you facts every single day about the things that are happening here in our country. We are always grateful to him and the entire team at justthenews.com. Go out to justthenews.com where you can see all of those breaking stories where John breaks down the story about the unanswered questions related to the Capitol riots and the declassification of documents in Russia. Stay right with us. When we come back, we're going to break down some of the other big stories of the day with our crew right here.